Introducing Force Factor Fundamentals. Exclusively at the Vitamin Shoppe, these men's health essentials have clinically studied ingredients like biopurine for enhanced absorption. Yohimbine, pine bark, and L-arginine can help you strengthen blood flow and heighten passion with doses that may bring you the results you crave. Now you can save 20% on Force Factor, including the fundamentals at the Vitamin Shoppe. Get these men's health game changers in your life at any The Vitamin Shoppe store or vitaminshoppe.com.
And so everyone was having these conversations without me almost about where the best place was to go and why and their memories of it. And it was just brilliant to see, you know, they were actually getting joy out of remembering their own good times in those countries.
Welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely, but I'm actually not hosting today's episode because it's a Throwback Thursday episode. It's with Kurt, who used to host the show, and Anna McNuff. She's been on the show quite a few times, and today's episode is a throwback from 2016 where she biked across Europe and let people vote for where she should go next on social media. And you know, if you've ever wanted to include people in your adventure that can't go, what a better way to have them involved than literally let them decide where you're going to go. I know that could go bad, you know, because the internet is known for kind of ruining things like this. But if you got a good community, group of people around you that would love to see you do something somewhere for them, or maybe people that physically can't go, or just, you know, like me, don't have the time right now to take off for a couple months and go cycle, you know, across a country or across a continent. What a cool idea. I think there should be more of this, letting people vote on where you go or help you and keep them engaged. So if you've got an adventure that you're planning that maybe there's a fundraising aspect to it, what a cool way to get people involved. I love the idea. And also, before we jump into the episode, I want to thank the Restoration Depot for sponsoring the show. They provide totally online virtual classes for all sorts of things. Everything from djembe drumming to Tai Chi to dance classes to intensati to essential oil educational classes. So basically what it is, it's you come together as a class like you would doing anything else, a yoga class, whatnot. But it's all online, you know, for whatever reason, whether you're traveling or you're working from home and you just can't get out. It's a great way to connect with folks, a really positive, a really fun environment, really fun community, and learn some of these new things. So, you know, if you're listening to this show, you're probably interested in trying new sports. And if you've been going to the same fitness classes or same workouts forever and ever, maybe try something new with the Restoration Depot. You can get $5 off your first class by using First Class Special at checkout, the discount code that is. But they're always adding new style classes, new skills to learn. So while you're trying a new adventure sport, maybe try a new a class as well. Maybe it's time for that too. So go to therestorationdepot.com and check it out. And also, just want to say thank you for tuning in today. It means a lot. So let's get into the episode.
Hello and welcome again to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I have a returning guest for us today. I'm really excited. One of my favorite interviews ever was with Anna McNuff. You may recall back in episode 110, and if you haven't heard it, go listen to it because it's awesome. Anna McNuff is the lady who ran the length of New Zealand, both islands, unsupported. She also biked all 50 U.S. states, unsupported. She is the daughter of Olympians, grew up in London, England, and she recently moved west of London into the hill country. And Anna is here to tell us about her latest adventure and about adventuring in general. So Anna, welcome back to the program.
Hello, it's great to be back. Thank you.
Oh, you bet. Anna, I always love talking to you because of your enthusiasm and because of all the things that you do. Catch us up a little bit on recent events. You said that you moved from London for the first time and now you're west of London somewhere. What's that about?
It was just this kind of feeling that I kept going off on all these adventures and then I'd come back to London, which is my home. But I would be incredibly unadventurous in London in my time in between adventures. And I just thought, I need to try and, all right, perhaps it's laziness, but I need to try and make it easier for myself to actually enjoy and live the adventurous lifestyle that I love so much. And so, I've made a move about 120 miles out of London to an area called Gloucestershire. And there's loads of hills and mud, and it's windy and rainy, and it's just, I can literally run out my door and be on a muddy trail in 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm enjoying it so far.
Oh, that's great. How long have you been there?
I've been here for 3 weeks at the moment.
3 weeks, so you're just getting started.
Yeah, I'm fresh, and it's really funny because certain things, not everything's open all the time. Whereas when you live in London, everything's open all the time, but everything's half the price as well. It's brilliant.
That helps. Yeah, that's great. I like to bring in that little bit of international perspective. I just looked at the stats before our call, Anna, because I was curious. The Adventure Sports Podcast is now being listened to in 184 out of 196 countries around the globe.
Whoa, that is amazing.
Yeah, so I was really excited about that, but it made me realize we better make sure that we keep an international perspective. So I'm glad that I'm interviewing you in the UK instead of here in Colorado.
Brilliant. Good. I'm helping with the international vibe. I love it.
Good. Well, Anna, on your last show, we talked quite a bit about your run through both islands of New Zealand, which was just amazing. And then we also spent a fair amount of time talking about biking through the U.S. states. And those are, like I said, listeners, if you haven't heard it, episode 110. But you've recently done another adventure, and I'm going to hold off explaining what that was for just a minute. I want to ask you this. Why so many adventures? What's the point?
Oh, it's a big world out there, Kurt, and it's I guess it's a problem. I have a wanderlust for sure, and I think anyone out there who has that feeling of wanderlust, it is a real urge, and you can't fight it. There's just this feeling. There's so much to learn, so much to see, so many people to meet, and then for me, adventures, they sort of scratch that itch, but then also is that opportunity to challenge yourself, to push yourself way beyond a place where you're comfortable, and to learn something and to come back and have grown in some way, and then in turn to share those stories with other people in the hope that they do the same. So I guess the short answer is it's addictive. Adventure is like a drug to me.
Well, you have a really great website, AnnaMcNuff.com. That's ANNAMCNUFF.com. And I just wanted to tell people that while you're listening to the show, not while driving, but if you are at your laptop, look at the pictures because you can see what Anna's been up to. It's really cool.
Yeah, keep it safe, kids. No checking of the internet while you're driving.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your most recent adventure, and you're calling this one Beyond My Back Gate. So this was pretty original. Tell us the objective, why you decided to do it, and then we'll dive into what it was like.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that you think it's original. I thought it was quite original. It came from a few thoughts. I always think, when I think of adventures, I think back to my childhood. And when I was a kid, I used to play in my granddad's back garden. And then the best times are when he would literally open his back gate and we would go out there into what I remember to be this massive jungle. And it was so exciting. And so I started thinking about, what's beyond our back gates? And at the same time, I started thinking about the fact that I hadn't explored much of Europe. And so I was starting to think, well, I'd quite like to do an adventure in Europe. And then when I thought about what kind of adventure to do, I thought, well, after New Zealand, I don't really feel like I had anything to prove to myself physically. I feel like I'd pushed myself so far to my physical limit that I thought, I've explored my physical limits for the time being anyway, at least. What I really wanted to explore was actually what goes on in my brain and the way I see the world, because we all have this certain lens we put on the world. And I thought, well, I love to plan. So what happens if I go on an adventure that I completely haven't planned? And so that was the idea. The idea was, why don't I go and explore Europe, but with an adventure where I don't know where I'm going, and actually the people of social media dictate where I go day by day, and I start by leaving out of my back gate, just like I did when I was a kid.
Okay. So explain how this works. You head out the back gate, and you got to go left or right.
Basically, I start, 2 days before I left, I threw up a post on Facebook and a poll on Twitter. And I said, right, on Monday morning, I'm leaving my back garden with, I don't actually have a back gate. I had to climb over the back fence, but it was all good fun. I'm leaving my back garden with nothing but a backpack and a biffy bag for 1 month. And I have 3 ferry ports that I can walk to. Which of these UK ferry ports do I start walking to? And so over the weekend, people voted. And come Monday morning, I totted up the votes and off I went. And I ended up going to a place called Harwich, which takes you on a ferry to Holland. And then, once I got to Holland, it was a case of, right, well, where do I go now? I'm in Holland, 3 options. And that carried on for the whole month. Every 2 days, I'd ask a question.
So were you biking, walking, hiking, hitchhiking?
Interesting, because I learned something it was actually quite emotional. First of all, I'd never started an adventure where I'd walked away from my home. There is something psychologically very tricky about leaving on this adventure, which is completely unplanned, unstructured. You have no end goal, and yet you're walking away from something that's very easy and comfortable. And in the first 2 days, I basically had a bit of a meltdown. I was thinking, what am I doing? I could get a train, just go back home now and stop this nonsense. And the other thing was that I thought walking would be this wonderfully spiritual, calming experience, and I'd have loads of brain space, which the truth was I did have lots of brain space, but walking down dual carriageways, because your route is being dictated by others, was absolutely just rubbish. And so 2 days in, I was faced with this decision where I thought the whole point of this adventure is for me to enjoy every single day and just to focus on one day at a time. And I'm not enjoying it. So I thought, I've got to switch something. I've got to change it up. So that's where I thought, I know, how about I get on my bike? And so I called my mate and they brought my bike to me and I spent the rest of the month on my bike.
Okay.
So I switched it up. But that was a lesson in itself, because it was a case of, well, if you don't like something, stop, have a think and change it. I could have ploughed on saying, oh, well, I said I was going to walk, so I'm going to walk. But I didn't. I switched it up instead, and it was a great idea.
We have interviewed people that have walked around the planet, Anna, literally.
Yeah.
And we've also interviewed people who have biked 60,000 plus miles, and that's the preferred method of travel. And I think each has an advantage. But what you were saying is that because you weren't choosing your route, you felt maybe unsafe and overwhelmed by the walking.
Yeah, and it would just take, I'd be stuck on these dual carriageways, like, kind of semi-interstates, and it would take me ages to get across them. And I think it just wasn't the right pace for the point I was at, in my mental state. I wanted more input. I craved the speed, basically. I was just missing the speed. So I think you're right. I think it's very individual, and I would definitely do a walking journey at some point, but perhaps on a trail in some wilderness, not down dual carriageways, because the tarmac's pretty hard on your feet as well.
Then you ended up biking, and tell us what the route ended up being.
Yeah, it was really cool. It ended up being, so I went from London to Harwich, got an overnight ferry over to Holland, which is brilliant because they wake you up at 6:30 in the morning by playing Don't Worry, Be Happy. It's brilliant. And then I got off the ferry. I went all the way across the Netherlands, into Germany, down the Rhine River until I hit Switzerland. And then I went across Switzerland to Lake Constance, so basically the whole width of Switzerland, then back on myself, and then down through France, and I finished up in Marseille.
I was trying to write down the route as you were saying it, and you're too fast for me. But I got Netherlands, Germany, down the Rhine, across Switzerland, France. Yeah.
So 4 countries, basically. Well, if UK, then Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, France. So I kind of, did a neat little loop from London down to the Mediterranean Sea, basically, but via a couple of other countries.
So you said that you're a planner, and so part of this adventure was to go against your basic nature and not plan.
Yeah.
Right? And then you said a couple days in, you were feeling like, what am I doing? You think that was part of the dynamic there?
Oh, completely. It was so uncomfortable. I can't express how uncomfortable it was to have not had in place, a set goal or just an idea of where I was going to be staying in a week's time. And it's not that I don't like to roll with it. That's what adventures are all about. Things go wrong, but I realised that a lot of the joy for me in adventures actually is the planning part. The adventure starts when I start looking at that map. And so, I felt like I'd been robbed of a bit of joy, really, without being able to plan. And so it was very, very uncomfortable for the first 2 weeks. And then I settled into a bit of a rhythm, and it was much easier.
What did you learn from that?
I learned I learned that you can't change yourself, because what I actually ended up doing was, instead of planning, months or weeks in advance, I got into a 2-day planning cycle where I did all the same processes that I would have done normally. I just squashed them into 2 days. So I knew when I was going to, post a vote, and then I knew that meant that I could then contact the next host 2 days ahead rather than 2 months ahead. And I got to the end and I actually thought, do you know what, you can't change the way you are. And for me, I love to plan. I just absolutely, it's part of me. It's part of the way I enjoy adventuring. But I did learn that you can force yourself to look at things in a different way. And I guess it did make me reconsider some of my anxieties about worrying whether things are going to work out or not, when the fact is, when you don't plan, everything always just works out anyway. But it's about doing what you feel comfortable with and what you enjoy.
I love this discussion, and it resonates with me personally, and I'm going to tell a story here in just a minute that you'll see why. But a lot of the people we interview, some say, just go, just get up and go. It'll work out. And other people talk about, man, the joy's in the planning. I spent a year getting ready for this trip. And it's two different personality types entirely, and I think you're right. It's kind of the core.
I think the only bad thing about planning is if the planning leads to too much procrastination and you don't actually go. Like, my plans are, I'm planning and I'm going to go. I think so many people get so het up on the planning that they don't go. That's why it gets a bad rep.
Well, Anna, my wife's name is Anne.
Yeah.
And when we were dating and engaged, we were working really hard to plan our wedding. And it fell on me then to plan the honeymoon trip.
Oh my.
And so we decided that we would go to Germany and we would get a Eurail pass and travel around Germany and Austria and different places. And so for me, that meant I bought the Eurail pass and the airplane tickets, and we were done.
Yep.
That was my planning. Now,
it's a very simple plan.
It was a great plan, I thought. And my wife, on the other hand, is like you. I don't know if it's because of the name. And
obviously.
Or anyway, we landed in Frankfurt, and I said, well, I was thinking maybe we would jump on the train and head toward Mainz, unless you want to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And she looks at me and says, so where are we staying tonight? I was like, I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get there. So it was a really interesting honeymoon. We were in Europe for 3 weeks. And it was the first time I realized how important planning was to her and how spontaneous I was in comparison. And that was going to be a dynamic for our whole marriage. And we've learned to accommodate each other. But we actually, we traveled some of the same places that you went on this trip. So we went to some of the same places. We went up and down the Rhine and had a delightful time. So this is kind of a flashback for me.
Oh, good. It's an amazing country, Germany. I'd never really spent any time there before, and I loved it.
Oh, it's delightful. It really is so rich with history and architecture, and just a beautiful landscape, the Black Forest, and then, of course, dropping down into the Alps in Austria and what have you. We had a great time. It was delightful.
Oh, and so many bakeries. I just ate so many baked goods in Germany. It was incredible.
Sure. So do you think that the voters who directed your path, do you think they did a good job?
Oh, they did an amazing job. And you know what was wonderful is, just like you've said, this is like a flashback for you. I found with every vote, everyone would throw their memories into the pot. It was like a Harry Potter kind of Pensieve. They would say, "Oh, you've got to go." One of the options was Vienna. "Oh, you've got to go to Vienna because," and they'd like screen grab their family albums from like years back of them at some ball in Vienna and post it on my Facebook. And so everyone was having these conversations without me, almost, about where the best place was to go and why, and their memories of it. And it was just brilliant to see. They were actually getting joy out of remembering their own good times in those countries.
That's fun. So
really good.
Tell us about a specific place that you visited that you probably never even would have thought of and how it impacted you.
The Black Forest, I think, was probably the most special place because the Rhine. I mean, you've been down it. It was mixed in that it's very industrial in the north, which I didn't realise, and then you get to those beautiful castles and all of those sort of Disneyland-esque things that you read about.
And
but then the
Rudesheim and Bacharach.
Oh, just amazing. Just there was this it's like castles everywhere. It's just insane. But then the Black Forest to me was just so surprising in terms of it was such a change in scenery, and it happened so quickly, or so it felt like. Within a day I was literally in these wooded pathways. Just it felt like miles from anywhere in these tiny little towns, and just really nice, just beautiful, serene landscapes and bits of snow. And I had to turn back. I couldn't make one of my destinations, which was the source of the Danube, because the snow was too heavy. So there's this crazy video of me getting just absolutely piled on with snow, apologising to everyone because I'm going to have to turn back. But I love the Black Forest.
So it was pushing the season a little bit, as we say over here. What were the dates of the trip?
Oh, yeah. So I went February 16th to March the 12th. And it was purely because I had a gap between two speaking engagements back in the UK. And I spotted the gap a few months out. And I thought, right, I'm going to keep that gap because I'm getting really adventure itchy. I can't yet go on another big adventure. But I'm going to, and that's where it was like, right, well, I've got this month. So it was pushing the seasons. But at the same time, I could have been sent south, straight down to the Med, straight down to almost Morocco, and it would have been toasty warm. But it was just that I happened to go east and slightly north at points. So
that's fun. So where were you at the end of February?
At the end of February, I was actually probably smack bang in the middle of Germany, I would say. Yeah, on the slightly to the west-hand side, but on the Rhine. But I was starting to enter the Black Forest at that point. So that's where, it was only 800 meters, which isn't particularly high, but the snow was coming down at that level. So yeah, I was pushing this season. But they also did say to me they were having a very cold snap, which I always feel very special when that happens when I'm there.
Well,
special weather.
Yeah, our trip was, believe it or not, about the same dates. February 18th is when we started, or that's when we were married. We started on the 19th, but we were there during the same season. So I have a real good feel for what it would have been like weather-wise.
Okay, cool.
Yep, and I was curious, did you experience Fasching there?
What's that? What did I experience?
Fasching. I didn't know if it would be in the area where you were, but it's a local festival where they chase away the dark spirits of winter by beating each other with twigs and dressing up in rags, and it's very interesting.
No, I feel like I've missed out. No, I didn't.
Well, that was just kind of a fun thought. I thought, well, maybe you experienced that too, since you were in the Black Forest around that time. I'm not sure the areas where it's observed. So I
think the spirits were chasing me, unfortunately. The winter spirits, they were chasing me.
Yeah, they turned you around for sure. So what about the rest of the route then? More details.
So I followed a lot of rivers, which was great because I was partly trying to stay low because of the snow and the weather up in the hills. But it also meant there are bike paths in, first of all, the Netherlands. The bike ways are just insane. It's like a red carpet is rolled out for you across the country. Cars are secondary to bikes in the Netherlands. And that was just phenomenal to see because it's so close to the UK. And yet in the UK, we're doing better, but you're always fighting for space on the road with the cars. So the Netherlands was fantastic for that. And then the bicycle route, again, alongside the Rhine River, all the way down through Germany was fantastic. There's always you can find your way very easily on it, and it's nicely graded. And then the same through Switzerland, actually. The France was probably a bit more like the UK. Patches of bike path alongside the Rhone, and then bits of road sections. But for the most part, it was amazing.
So when you got to the south of France, did the weather change quite a bit?
Oh, yeah. Although it was a bit bonkers because I thought, right, this is it. From Geneva, I left Geneva and I was like, great, I'm now heading south. And I had to get over a few mini mountains to make it to the Rhone River Valley. And I thought I was out of the woods there. I thought, brilliant. And then as I left Geneva, it started snowing. So I thought, oh, gosh, I was sort of a week to go at this point. And then actually the next 3 days, I had some rather crazy storms. One storm that completely just blew up the Rhone Valley right towards me that was just cold rain, which I think is worse than snow. But then in the last 2.5 days, the sun came out. I was in shorts and T-shirt and it was just bananas. Like it was just so much easier traveling in those kind of weather. And I had a tailwind as well all the way down for the last 2.5 days. And so it was just gorgeous.
Well, tell us about a challenging moment on the trip. I know that there had to be times when you said, ugh.
What was a really challenging moment? It was probably just the really long days, and I feel like I'm getting like old and wise in my adventure ways, where I've started to realise that I actually like to take longer to do things. I like to stop, and I like to have time to, have a coffee in town and practice my terrible German, and that for me becomes so much more part of the adventure than just making the miles. So when I was doing the 50 states trip, I was bashing out on average 75 miles a day. And on this trip, I was trying to get closer to about 60 miles a day, like 100 kilometers. And there were some days where just because I was trying to arrange hosts and people to stay with, the distances were pushing me up over 80 miles, which is fine, but it just means you've got to spend the whole day on the bike. And there were some times where you just leave and it would be a headwind and you could hardly move. And those were the times where I was thinking, what am I doing? And on one of those particular really long days, because I was struggling so much, I hadn't bothered to eat and I just completely bonked. And I found myself 20 minutes later outside of this big supermarket that I'd been cycling for an hour and a half to get to. And I sat down and I have never eaten so much in my life. It was disgusting. I ate a whole block of cheese, like all these apricot pastries, a huge baguette, big bottle of strawberry milkshake. Those were probably the long days and the times when I didn't eat, which was silly.
Wow. So did you have your gear with you on panniers at this point, or were you like shipping it ahead? How did that work?
No, I carried it all the whole way, and I thought I was going to camp. So I had my bivy bag, and my jet boil and everything else with me, so that I was completely self-sufficient because that's the way I really like it. But actually, out of 28 nights away, I spent 24 of them being hosted by strangers. Which to me was just phenomenal. I can't believe at late notice how people just opened their doors to me and just took me in and fed me and introduced me to their grandma and rode with me. It was brilliant.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. Save up to $1,200 on select Sleep Number 360 smart beds and adjustable bases, plus special financing, only for a limited time. Special financing subject to credit approval. Minimum monthly payments required. See store for details.
So how did you find people that were going to host you?
Sometimes through Facebook. So because the more Facebook followers you get, then it ends up a friend of a friend of a friend, and someone would, just a bizarre coincidence, they would say, "Oh my gosh, you're heading to this town that's only 10 miles from me. Like, if you want somewhere to stay." And I'd of course say, "Yeah, I'll cycle another 10 miles to come and meet you, cool Facebook person." And so that would happen a little bit. And then the other thing I used was Warm Showers, which I'm a huge fan of, which is a cycle touring website where if you're a cycle tourist, you host cycle tourists and they host you for free. So a bit like couch surfing.
So it's called Warm Showers, and you do that. It's warmshowers.com or?
It's .org.
.org.
Yeah, it's started by an American actually who lives in Arkansas, who I've stayed with when I was on my US trip. Him and his mate set it up, and it's now got 77,000 users around the globe.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, it's amazing. And the best thing is, it's not about, for me anyway, it's not about the free hosting. I mean, that's wonderful, but it's about the fact that you enter into this person's house at, say, 5 or 6 in the evening, and you sit down and you share stories with them, and they get out their books about when they cycled, around this part of the country or that part, and you just exchange a love of adventure, and then you pedal off the next morning, and you basically sort of exchanged just adventure lives. It's great.
It seems that the people connections are the best part of travel for me.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. That's, a country to me is just it's just a mass of land until you put the people in it. And that's really where you get the richness of it, I think.
Well, tell us about someone that was very memorable that you met along the way.
It was probably this little family that, they weren't little, but they were a small family unit. And they just moved up into the hills, not too far from the Alps, actually. And it took me 2 hours. I came off route to ride to them because they were the only host in the area on that Warm Showers website. And I cycled up to them, and it was just crazy. There was a couple, and they had a little son called Colin. And he was just so cute because even though we had no language commonality, I was speaking in broken French and he was sort of speaking at me in bits of French and English. we just played together, and I really enjoyed that. And also, I was so much less nervous speaking French to a 3-year-old than I was trying to speak to his parents. But that was one of the families where I just walked in the door and it was like I'd known them my whole life. It was so easy and comfortable. And that was just someone that I thought, I'm so pleased I went and rode up this hill, for 2 hours, which actually I quite enjoyed. But I just thought they're definitely some friends for life, and I really hope that they're going to come to London, and that when Colin's a bit older, I can show him the sights of the city and stuff like that. But that's a really special memory, and especially when you've been away from your own family for a little bit, it's nice to be in a family environment where there's that kind of warm feeling to it.
Now, in retrospect, was it a good idea? Would you do it again, or would you choose another way to do this?
I wouldn't do it again. No, it was a fantastic idea, though. I learned so much. I met so many amazing people. I got to actually see Europe, which is just ridiculous as a British citizen that I haven't explored, even scratched the surface of Europe. I think it was definitely a fantastic idea. I wouldn't do it again. I'm a planner. I love to plan. I'm getting my maps out and I'm making spreadsheets, and it's all planning from here on in.
So speaking of planning, you mentioned
Yes.
that you're headed to South America next. What's that about?
Yes. Well, it's very much work in progress, but the idea is to go the length of South America. It'll take me about 6 months, I think. And I'm planning to do it with a friend, which is brilliant. It's the first time I'll actually be doing a big adventure with another person. And we're going to do it on something called a kick bike, which is like, if you imagine the little scooters that kids have, the micro scooters, it's an adult's version of that with big wheels. So there's no chains or anything, no pedals. You just scoot along. And that's the plan.
So a kick bike, is there room for panniers and gear?
Yeah, just about, yeah. So that's what we're working through at the moment, because you have to go very light. You can have a bar bag, and you can have a front pannier and a rear pannier. And I found some videos, there's some really funny videos online of people actually going with them fully loaded, really heavily loaded. But I think we'd be trying to go pretty light. So basically the amount of kit I took to New Zealand in my backpack, I would be trying to get that on the kick bike. And the other option is a trailer, but that gets a bit more tricky. So we're just working through that at the moment. But it's absolutely bonkers, but I think it's possible. So that's a good kind of fine line between bonkers and impossible, if you ask me.
It sounds like a ton of fun. And you know what? Being on something like that, the local people will say, we've not seen that before.
This is exactly my point. People say, why don't you just cycle it? And I say, I know I could cycle it, and I'm sure I'd have a wonderful time, and I'm sure it'd be challenging. But I think if you rock up into a town on a giant scooter, people are going to go, what on earth is that? And they want to talk to you. And the other thing is for kids, I'm all about trying to talk to kids about adventures and get them inspired to get out there. And I think certainly in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the US, but the kids all have these scooters. They go to school on them. They understand it as a mode of transport. And so I think if you supersize that and you say to them, I went, the length of South America, or spent 6 months journeying around South America on something you go to school on, basically, that to them is, I think, so much more tangible.
Oh, yeah. When we interviewed you before, you mentioned that in your running trip across New Zealand, you would phone ahead to communities and set up opportunities to speak in the schools to the kids.
Yes, yeah. So I'll be doing the same thing again. So I had a bit of a block at one point where I came up with the idea for this journey, and then I thought, that's great, but it's not, where's the kind of the more element in it? Where's that doing a bit more good for the world? And then I thought, international schools. There's loads of international schools, so it doesn't matter that my Spanish is terrible. I can actually go into those schools and arrange and do the same thing and speak to the kids, and do the same model basically all over again.
So you do motivational speaking, and you've been doing this in schools. Do you do it to adult organizations as well?
Yep, I definitely do, the grown-up kids. Yep, and I find them equally rewarding. Actually, the kids are brilliant because they're at such an impressionable age that they, especially the younger ones, they truly think anything's possible. But it's really satisfying if you can get an adult to look at something in a different way. So I really enjoy doing the businesses and festivals as well.
Will you give us just a snippet, just a little piece of how a talk might go to kids or to adults? What's the point of the discussion?
Well, they're slightly different. For kids, it's all about, you know, getting outside of their comfort zones. And I show them that diagram, which is the tiny little comfort zone, and then that big bit outside where the magic happens.
Right.
And I talk to them about what their individual passions are. So I'll get a class to put their hands up and tell me how they would spend a spare hour of their time if I gave it to them. And what that shows them, or what I hope it shows them, is that within a class of 30 kids, you're going to have almost, you know, 25 different answers, and that individuality is what makes you who you are, and it's something to be embraced and held on to, and don't take that for granted. So that's what I tend to do with the kids, and I've just started doing workshops as well. So we go into a room and I say to them, right, you've woken up, you've gone downstairs in your house, there's no one in there, there's a credit card with no limit on it on the table, what are you going to do? And that just gets their brains like exploded. And then for adults, it's a lot about, I did a TEDx talk recently, which was about, it was called But What If I Fail? And it was about how we have this fear of failure, and it gets to the point where we don't even start on things. You know, a bit like I said on the last interview about my New Zealand run, I didn't actually think I could do it. I wasn't sure, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start. So that's what my talks for adults tend to focus on, is just having the confidence and the courage just to give it a crack, just get out there, because at the end of the day, you know, a life is to be lived and embraced every opportunity. So they're my messages.
Well, I think you're a great example of that. I noticed on your website, you mentioned that you recently received an award for one of the top female adventurers on the planet. What was that about?
Oh, that's The Guardian, yes. One of our very well-respected national newspapers. Yeah, they put me in a top 10. Last year, they did a list of the top 10 female adventurers from kind of the years gone by. And then they've just refreshed it and done a top 10 female adventurers of the current time. And they very kindly included me in it, which was very flattering. So yeah, that was a bit of an honor, really.
Well, congratulations. I love what you're doing and the example that you're setting and the inspiration that you are to people. So what inspires you and keeps you going? This is an energy-intensive lifestyle you have.
Oh, it is, and it's full of ups and downs. And, you know, don't get me wrong, honestly, I have my days where I think, what am I doing? You know, it would be easy to go back to a life I once knew, where there's a steady paycheck and a comfortable, you know what to expect from life. But and in turn, that's what keeps me going, is there's always surprises. There's always things around the corner. There's always points you get to in your life where if you remember to stop and look back, you go, man, did I think this would be happening a year ago? No way. And this is so freaking cool. And I just get to do, I'm so lucky. I fill my days with things that I'm hugely passionate about. And in turn, that seems to have an effect on other people. And then they get passionate and then they inspire me. And I guess it's the potential for more. There's always potential for growth and learning. And that's what keeps me going.
Well, what advice do you have for our listeners? There are so many out there who are thinking, wow, I don't know how she pulls all this off, but I got to try something like this. How do they transition from the status quo to an adventure-focused lifestyle?
I would, first of all, I would identify what your biggest barriers are. And I'm sure for most people, they're going to be time and money. My ride through Europe for a month, in the whole month, I spent £462, which is probably, what's that in dollars? A bit less than double, so maybe $700. Is that right? Yeah, about that. So that was the whole month of living. And that was a month-long adventure filled with stories and tales that I'm going to tell my grandkids. So when you're actually on the adventure, it really doesn't cost that much money. So I don't think money needs to be a barrier. It's just something you need to think about, perhaps saving up a little bit. And the other thing is time. There's so many ways to have adventures, whether they're weekend adventures or just trying to negotiate a little bit of extra leave, maybe. I know that's not possible for some people, but they don't have to be big adventures. But I think the thing is just to look at what the barriers are and be really honest with yourself. What is it that's actually stopping you going? And just find a way to remove them. And it sounds simple, but there's always a way to remove that barrier. It just takes a decision in one direction or the other.
And we all know it's easier to come up with an excuse why not to do something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Than it is
I'm
to
good
just
at those.
Go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's actually the scariest moment when you go, oh my gosh, I'm out of excuses. I've got to go. Okay, right. That's frightening. But yeah, I would just remove the barriers because, you've only got one life. You don't want to get to the end of it and realize that you told yourself a lot of excuses, really.
So how about this? I would like to hear one highlight from the New Zealand trip and one highlight from the biking the 50 states trip.
Oh, the highlight from the New Zealand trip is probably running along. Yeah, there's this ridge line at the top of the South Island, running along that at 1,700 meters up, being absolutely petrified one minute and completely elated the next. And I'm looking out on mountains upon mountains, poking through the clouds, and I can see the Tasman Bay to my left, and I'm completely alone, and the wind's like blowing. And I've just felt ecstatic, and I thought, it doesn't matter that I'm petrified. This is real living. And then from the US ride, I would have to say my biggest highlight was probably the way I finished it, which was I rode up Mount Haleakala on Maui. I cycled up that with my dad, which goes from sea level to 10,000 feet in one go. And just spending, hours and hours in the saddle next to my dad, who'd flown out to meet me, along with my mum, who was in the support car. That to me was just a really special experience. So those are my two highlights.
You also are a big proponent of doing micro adventures.
Yes.
And so you like to do smaller things and try to get other people involved in that. Give us a rundown of what a micro adventure is.
So it's pioneered by this guy called Alistair Humphreys, and the idea is if you're in a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, that there's all of those hours when you finish your job at 5 o'clock before you have to be back at your desk at 9 o'clock the next morning, and that you should use those hours to go adventuring. And so I started it with a group in London, and we set a challenge for 6 weeks originally. We were going to spend every single Wednesday night. We would leave our desks at 5 o'clock. We'd get a train for an hour out of London. We'd sleep on a hilltop. We'd chat. We'd eat a picnic, watch the sun go down, and then we'd be back at our desks for 9 o'clock the next morning. And we ended up carrying on for 25 consecutive weeks. Every single Wednesday night we went out to the hills, and different groups of people, sometimes up to 20 people, sometimes there were 5 of us, but we just explored all these pockets around a city and just looked at it in a different way. They were so beautiful. You don't need to go far to find beauty at all. And so it also feels like you just had this weekend in the middle of your week. It's phenomenal.
I have to tell you a really fun coincidence since I have you here.
Yeah.
The way I met you, Anna, was through Alistair.
Yay!
I heard about his micro adventures, and I emailed him and said, would you like to be on the show? And he was booked, and he said, you know what? You got to get Anna on. So that's why I contacted you. And it's fun you just brought him up, because I have to tell you what happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
My son was home from college, and one of the things he wanted to do was go spelunking in a cave. And
awesome.
So he knew of a cave that's in a canyon about 20 miles south of where we are in the mountains. But we didn't know how to find the cave. So I went on the internet and I typed, the cave in Clear Creek Canyon. And I found directions to the cave, how to find it, written by none other but Alistair.
Yay! I remember him posting about this now. Yeah, I remember that.
Well, that's the funny thing is he lives where you are, not where I am.
Yeah,
How does he know about my cave?
I seem to remember he was on some kind of trip to promote a film or something, and he'd snuck off. And he made a little film about it, I think, as well. Yeah. Brilliant. Love it. I love it.
I was really surprised. It was just a funny turn of events. It's a small world, I'm telling you.
It is.
It is a small world. And the other side of that is that for all the listeners, if you want to go running to this small cave, it's closed right now because the whole area now is closed to protect raptors during the nesting season.
Oh, right.
So we had beautiful hike on the canyon walls, but we were not able to hike anywhere near the cave. So we had a great adventure anyway, and it was a micro adventure, just like you're talking about.
Amazing.
Well, how do your activities benefit others? I know that what you're doing as a motivational speaker and all these adventures and everything, what's the goal for the planet or for individuals?
That's a broad one. What's the plan to take over the world? You know what? For me, it's just that we're all so individual, whether you're an adult, a child, whether you've found the thing that you love or not. We've all got something about us that makes us that makes us special, and that regardless of how much money you've got, how much time you've got, once you connect and find that thing, I think there's nothing that can touch you. So what I'm trying to do is just trying to help people have the confidence to seek that thing out, whatever it is. And I say thing because for me it's adventure and travel and, you know, pushing all my comfort zones and all this jazz. But for some other people it might be a passion for ancient Chinese history or whatever, you know, but whatever it is, or music or art. I've got a friend who's an adventurer, but she's a creative adventurer in that she now travels the world and she does sketches of all the places she visits, and she turns them into books. And that's her combining her two passions. So she's really started to find her thing, but it took her ages to start to even move towards it. So that's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to show people, you know, as an example of, it doesn't always work out. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing most of the time, but actually all I'm doing is blindly going in search of something that makes me happy and moving away from the things that don't fulfill and satisfy me.
You know, the Adventure Sports Podcast logo says, enlarge your life.
Yeah,
and
love it.
That's what it's about. And
it is.
I'll bet you're the same way I am. I think back over the last year or the last 20 years, it doesn't matter, but I think back over the last year, and I think, what did I do this year? And I remember climbing snowmass with my kids, or climbing Parnassus, or some of the epic ski days that we had in the Colorado Rockies here. And then I think, what else did I do? Well, I went to work.
Yeah, that's it. It's the stuff you remember, isn't it? When you're really old, and the stories you want to tell your grandkids. And can you imagine a world full of people doing what lights them up? I just think that's a better world to me. So I'm all for it.
I love it. Very cool indeed. Well, you told us a very funny story about the New Zealand trip. We'll let people go back to episode 110 to hear that one. But can you come up with another funny story for us from other adventures?
Oh gosh, any more funny stories? Oh gosh, I'm trying to think.
I really put you on the spot.
Oh no, do you know what? Did I tell you about the time I got asked on a date in the middle of the Nevada desert? That was pretty epic. Yeah. So I was just cycling down this road, and I pulled over at the side of the road just to have some kind of Skittles and a little bit of sugar. I was sort of, you know, getting low on energy, and I was about 10 miles from where I was going to finish. And literally there'd been no cars passing me. This was, you know, in the Great Basin, basically. So there's nothing there. And then this one car comes past me, facing me, towards me. He goes past me and sort of, you know, I waved because it's the only person I'd seen that day. And then I pulled over and did my bit at the side of the road, was eating. And the car like turns around and comes screeching up behind me. And he was very polite. And he came over and said, "Oh, you okay, miss? Do you need any help?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm fine, thanks. You know, I'm just having a bit of a meal." And we had a little bit of a chat. And then he basically said, "Well, where are you going?" I said, "Well, you know, the next town," which there's nothing in the next town really anyway. And then he said, "Well, can I take you to dinner?" And he was a lawyer from New York on some kind of escape to the open spaces. And I was just a bit taken aback. And my response was probably not the best for his ego. I just went, "Oh no, I'm fine, thanks." But what I meant to say was, "Thank you very much. That's very nice of you, but I'll have to politely decline." But I just thought it was hilarious. I thought, you know, he turned his car around and I looked at myself. You know, I'm in my Lycra with holes in it. I've got sweat stains all over me. I'm absolutely disgusting. I haven't showered in days. And I still get asked on a date. I thought, still got it. You know, it's pretty good.
It was the desert date.
A desert date, yeah. I was kind of thinking that maybe he'd set up a little candlelight dinner, you know, in the middle of the desert or something. But yeah, I had to decline, sadly. Very nice chap.
Well, remember, it's all about the people connections you make along the way.
It is, and that was one.
One you had to say no to.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he's out there listening to the show right now, and he heard your proper response, and he probably feels better.
Oh, good. I hope he does. I think we left as friends, so it's okay.
That's fantastic. Well, Anna, we're running out of time. Again, I'll bet we could go on for hours, but I love hearing your stories. I love what you're doing. How can people reach you?
Through my website, which is annamcnuff.com. And then you can also find me on Facebook if you search Anna McNuff Adventures, or on Twitter at Anna McNuff as well.
I just have to say that you embody the message of the Adventure Sports Podcast. I really believe that. And it's one of the reasons why I love having you on the show. And listeners out there, get in touch with Anna, follow what she's doing, get inspired, and go do something fun, meet people along the way. It's a beautiful world. Go experience it.
Amazing.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
Introducing Force Factor Fundamentals. Exclusively at the Vitamin Shop, these men's health essentials have clinically studied ingredients like biopurine for enhanced absorption. Yohimbine, pine bark, and L-arginine can help you strengthen blood flow and heighten passion with doses that may bring you the results you crave. Now you can save 20% on Force Factor, including the fundamentals at the Vitamin Shop. Get these men's health game changers in your life at any The Vitamin Shop store or vitaminshop.com.